What if one night changed everything you built? Not because of scandal, not because of betrayal, but because your heart made a choice and your pride refused to follow. She was the boss, he was the rule she broke, and what they shared for one night, neither of them forgot. Have you ever let pride speak louder than your feelings? Have you ever wanted to reach out, but didn't know how to undo the silence? Then you'll understand why Celeste Monroe lost more than love. She lost herself for a while. This isn't a story about office romance. It's about power, fear, and the cost of holding back when it matters most. If this already has you leaning in, take a second to like this video and subscribe. These stories don't just entertain, they reveal the quiet choices that change everything. And now, let's begin. Celeste Monroe didn't date employees. She didn't entertain blurred lines, hallway rumors, or soft glances across glass-walled conference rooms. Not anymore. 10 years ago, when she was just another black woman with a backpack full of floor plans and a head full of dreams, no one believed in her vision. They dismissed her, smiled when they meant to scoff. Clients shook her hand, but looked for someone else in charge. So she built Monroe Design Group like armor, stone by stone. She hired sharp minds, managed lean budgets, won bids no one thought she'd win. Now, at 34, she ran one of Seattle's most respected architecture firms. And her name? It meant excellence. With success came structure. And structure meant rules. Rules she enforced with ruthless fairness, especially with herself. Rule #1, never date inside the company. Rule #2, never explain your emotions in front of staff. Rule #3, never give second chances to anyone who tests rule first or second. These weren't just policy points, they were survival instincts. Until Cairo Ellis. The first time she saw him, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was a Thursday. Rain laced the tall windows. The office buzzed after an all-hands meeting. Celeste stepped out of the boardroom and saw a small group of interns reviewing renderings near the printer. One of them, a tall, lean man in a deep green hoodie, was talking through a concept sketch, confident, fast, clear, no arrogance, just conviction. She paused. He didn't notice, but she did. Later that week, his name came up again. Cairo Ellis, 27, one of the firm's new junior architects, top of his grad class, focused, a little bold, but always respectful. He wasn't the loudest in meetings, but when he spoke, people listened. Celeste did too. She told herself it was because of his ideas, his innovation, the way he simplified complexity. But something about him unsettled her. He wasn't intimidated by her title. He didn't shrink when she challenged him. That was new. Over the next 2 months, Celeste noticed the subtle shifts. Cairo asked the kinds of questions that forced the team to rethink projects. He stayed late, but never complained. He spoke to everyone, the janitor, the client, the courier, like they mattered. And with her, he was always professional, always careful. But occasionally, too occasionally, their eyes would lock during meetings. Long enough to notice, not long enough to be called anything. She'd catch herself adjusting her blouse, watching his jaw clench when he disagreed with a design pitch. Once, during a Friday presentation, Cairo stood at the head of the room outlining a rooftop housing concept. Celeste leaned back, arms crossed, fully aware she was staring. His voice dipped. And finally, this layout balances structural strength with what matters most, flow. Then his eyes met hers. Flow. The word hit her stomach harder than it should have. She blinked. He looked away first. Outside of work, Celeste's life was neat. An apartment in Belltown, a gym routine she didn't skip, a rotation of first dates that never made it past the second drink. Most men she met couldn't handle her schedule, or her success, or the fact that she was selective with her vulnerability. She used to explain it. Now she didn't bother. But that week, she found herself thinking about Cairo more often than she admitted. Not just about what he looked like, though he was hard to ignore, but about how she felt around him. Awake, observed, understood. Then came the annual Monroe Gala, an evening built to celebrate the firm's wins and network with future investors. The space was beautiful, a high-rise ballroom on the 28th floor, floor-to-ceiling glass, rain tracing streaks against the view of downtown. Everyone dressed like a magazine cover, laughter, wine, jazz. Celeste wore black satin, diamond studs, confidence like perfume. Cairo wore charcoal grey, no tie, hair cleanly cut, calm. They spoke only once during the event. "Great turnout," he said, refilling a glass. She raised an eyebrow. "Impressed?" "Always," he replied, voice smooth. She smiled. "Enjoy your night, Ellis." "Was planning to," he said, holding her gaze a second too long. Then they both walked away. But later, much later, when the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, Cairo stayed behind. Celeste did too. A glass of Merlot in her hand, her heels off, her guard down. And that's when it happened. It didn't start with a kiss. It started with a look, then silence, then a laugh, then the touch of her hand on his forearm, light, uncertain, but not casual. He didn't pull away. They were no longer CEO and employee in that moment. They were woman and man, wanting, curious, holding back until they didn't. Celeste had kissed men before, but never one who made her forget she was the most powerful person in the room. With Cairo, it wasn't just chemistry. It was collapse, of rules, of distance, of fear she didn't know she was still holding. She moved first. Her hand grazed his. A question lived in the silence between them. He didn't speak. He leaned in, and she let him. The kiss was soft, deliberate, not rushed or greedy. It tasted like restraint finally unhooked. Then her fingers found his collar. Then his hands, steady, warm, circled her waist. She should have stopped. She didn't. Not when he pressed his forehead to hers and whispered, "Tell me to go." Not when she didn't. They moved slowly to the back of the room, where the lights were low, where no one could see, where professionalism became something they both shed like jackets. Every touch held history they hadn't shared. Every breath felt like a confession. He kissed her neck. She gripped his shirt. When he paused, she didn't. She whispered his name like she'd thought it 1,000 times. "Cairo." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from finally choosing something real. He kissed her again. And the rest? It was a series of quiet yeses between two people who stopped pretending they didn't want more. After, they lay on the velvet lounge at the far end of the ballroom, clothes slightly askew, still catching their breath. He didn't leave right away. He held her hand, brushed her hair back, smiled, not like a man who won, but like a man who finally allowed himself to feel. Celeste hadn't felt that warm in months, years, maybe. They didn't talk much. There was no need. It wasn't a one-night stand. It was a night that removed every wall she'd spent a decade building. And somehow, it didn't feel wrong. It felt overdue. She didn't think about the policies, or the gossip, or the fallout. Not that night. Not when he helped her into her coat. Not when he called for the car and walked her to the curb. "I'll see you Monday," he said quietly, brushing her wrist with his thumb. She nodded. As the car pulled away, Celeste rested her head against the window, blinking through the rain. Something had shifted, not just in the room, in her. The weekend moved slowly. Celeste didn't text him. She didn't need to. She spent Saturday clearing her inbox, sipping tea, and replaying every moment. Every look, every breathless second when he stopped being her employee, and became someone she could imagine much more with. She thought about how sure his touch had been, how careful, even in passion. He hadn't taken anything. He gave. On Sunday she opened her sketchbook, the one she hadn't touched in over a year. Lines poured from her fingers, not buildings, not towers, movement, curves, a form, a shoulder, a jawline, a hand gripping a wineglass. His hand. She closed it quickly, feeling a strange mix of pride and guilt. She shouldn't be this soft. She wasn't made for softness anymore. But she didn't regret it. Monday arrived. She walked into the office with her usual poise. Tailored white blouse, navy pencil skirt, calm face. Except her heart beat a little harder than usual. She told herself it was nerves, excitement, maybe even hope. By 9:15 a.m., she still hadn't seen him. By 9:45, she walked past his desk. He was there, focused, typing, headphones in. He didn't look up. No nod. No smile. No pause. Celeste waited until lunch. He walked right past her office, talking to Jasmine from marketing, like Friday night had been erased from his body. She waited again. By 3 p.m., she couldn't take it. She messaged him. "Can we talk for 5 minutes?" He replied, "Sure." "Your office?" 2 minutes later, he knocked and stepped in. Her chest tightened. "Close the door," she said quietly. He did. He didn't sit until she gestured to the chair across from her desk. Cairo looked calm, professional, polished, like a different man from the one who held her in the dark. Celeste swallowed. "We need to talk." He folded his hands. "About the project deadline?" She blinked. "No, about Friday night." He didn't flinch. But something behind his eyes closed. "I think it's best we forget it," he said. Just like that. Celeste's heart dipped. "Forget it?" He leaned forward. "Celeste, you're my boss. I admire you, respect you. But that crossed a line." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "So it meant nothing." "I didn't say that," he replied, eyes finally locking with hers. "I said it was a mistake." Her lips parted. He kept going. "It complicates everything. Your reputation. My role. The team. This firm means something to both of us. I can't risk that." Celeste stiffened. "So you'll pretend it didn't happen?" He stood. "I'm protecting what matters. And I wasn't worth that risk?" she asked, standing too. He paused. "You're worth more than one night and a fallout headline." Celeste stepped around the desk, standing close enough to feel the heat still between them. "You didn't even fight for it," she said, voice sharp. Cairo's expression shifted. Because love, if that's what it was, shouldn't cost someone their dignity. Her eyes burned. He opened the door. "I'll get back to work." And he was gone. Celeste stared at the empty chair. The scent of his cologne still clung to the air. She'd led boardrooms, closed million-dollar deals, spoken on national stages, but nothing had prepared her for being wanted, and then dismissed like protocol. She pressed her hands on her desk. This wasn't just about rejection. This was about control. And the one moment she gave it up, the office didn't look different. Same glass walls, same scent of cedar and toner, same rhythm of keyboards tapping in synchronized urgency. But for Celeste, everything had shifted. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't happen next. No follow-up, no conversation, no acknowledgement that something raw and human had passed between them. Cairo Ellis walked around like nothing cracked beneath the surface. And that killed her more than if he had stormed in with accusations or apologies. He was cold. And cold was unfamiliar. She'd built a life off cool detachment, but never expected to be on the receiving end of it. That week, she buried herself in the new Seattle waterfront project, worked through lunch, reviewed contracts twice, signed off on 3 design drafts and rejected 2. Every time she passed Cairo in the hallway, he gave her the same polite nod. A nod, no tension, no eyes darting, no nervousness, just professional indifference, which somehow hurt worse than a mistake would have. It told her she was forgettable, disposable. Forget the gala, forget the velvet couch, Forget how his voice softened when he said her name. All of it meant nothing now. On Thursday, the team gathered in the lower conference room for a brainstorm. Celeste entered late, deliberately. Cairo was already seated, flipping through printed renderings. When she stepped in, he stood briefly, nodded, then sat back down. "Morning," he said to no one in particular. He didn't look at her. During the session, he spoke twice. Both times his ideas were solid, innovative, direct. No flair, no charm, no trace of the man who had once asked her to tell him to go, and silently prayed she wouldn't. Celeste listened, lips tight. At one point, their hands both reached for the same pen on the table. Their fingers brushed. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull back. He simply took the pen and kept writing. She blinked twice, feeling a wave rise in her throat, and then it passed. Later that day, Jasmine from marketing popped into Celeste's office. "Hey, just wanted to say, great energy in today's session," Jasmine smiled. "Cairo's pitch for the rooftop redesign? Sharp. I think he's the team's quiet ace." Celeste forced a nod. "Yes. He's talented. Crazy. He's only been here a few months," Jasmine added. "I heard he used to freelance before grad school." "I'm not sure," Celeste said quickly, already reaching for another file. Jasmine got the hint. "Anyway, we're all excited about the Portland proposal. I'll lock in the media deck next week." "Perfect," Celeste replied, not looking up. When the door clicked shut behind her, Celeste exhaled slowly, not because Jasmine had said anything wrong, but because everything was starting to sound right, except the voice in her own head. That night, Celeste sat alone in her apartment. She poured a glass of Cabernet, opened her laptop, stared at the company's performance chart. Record growth, 0 debt, 3 awards pending. She should have felt unstoppable. Instead, she stared at the spreadsheet like it was mocking her. Cairo's name appeared twice in the current roster. Lead assistant, design planning, urban housing, support architect, waterfront commercial concept. She hovered over his name with the mouse, then stopped. What would she say? "Come back to my office and tell me you meant it?" Undo the last 4 days with a sentence? No. She couldn't risk that. Not as CEO. Not as a black woman in power in a city still hesitant to hand her the microphone. Not when the media was watching every move she made. So she did nothing. She closed the file, poured another glass, and told herself, "You can want something and still walk away." She told herself again, "You can want something and still walk away." By Friday morning, Celeste was mechanical. She wore a silk blouse that meant business. Her heels echoed louder than usual down the office hall. The team noticed. When she stepped into meetings, conversations halted a second longer than usual. People said she seemed focused. But she knew the truth. She wasn't focused. She was frozen, trying not to feel what pride refused to let her say. That afternoon, the office lights dimmed early. A rainstorm had moved in, the kind that made the city shimmer and blur through the windows. Celeste stayed late. The building emptied floor by floor. At 7:15 p.m., she walked toward the studio lounge, hoping to review some mood boards alone. But the door was ajar. She paused. Inside, Cairo sat near the drafting table, sketching, his jacket off. Sleeves rolled. A single desk lamp lit his work. He didn't hear her. She watched him for a moment, the way he focused, how his lips moved slightly when he was deep in thought. Something inside her cracked. She knocked. He looked up. Calm, not startled, not tense. "Evening," he said. She stepped in. "You're still here." "Trying to finish a mock-up," he replied. Silence. The rain pattered the glass. "Can I ask you something?" Celeste said finally. Cairo set the pencil down. "Of course." She walked closer. Slow, careful. "Did it mean nothing to you?" she asked. His eyes held hers for the first time all week. "Don't do this," he said quietly. Say it, she whispered. Did it mean nothing? He stood. It meant everything, he said, which is why I left it there. She swallowed. You're scared. I'm being realistic. You didn't even fight. I'm not allowed to, he said. You're my boss. That's your excuse? That's your rule. She stepped closer, now inches away. Cairo's jaw tightened. Do you want me to risk everything, Celeste? No, she said. I want you to care. I do, he said. Which is why I walked away. Celeste's voice cracked. You didn't walk. You erased me. He exhaled. Because love should never cost someone their identity. The silence between them was heavier than the storm outside. And then, for the second time in her life, he walked past her without looking back. Celeste didn't go home that night. She sat in her office, lights dimmed, watching the storm slip down the tall windows like the city was trying to cry for her. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She thought about texting him. She typed twice, deleted twice. Can we talk? Backspace. I didn't expect to feel this way. Delete. She threw the phone face down. She wasn't used to this kind of silence. Not from men, not from herself. Her power had always come from clarity. If she wanted something, she said it. If she needed to walk, she did. But this wasn't business. This was heart. And the heart didn't always care about logic. Monday returned like clockwork. The office was back to its rhythm. Meetings, briefs, project timelines. Celeste was present, but not there. She smiled in meetings but forgot what was said. She signed documents twice. She missed lunch. Cairo didn't check on her, didn't ask if she was okay, but she felt his presence. In every quiet room, every time someone mentioned his name, every idea pitched that felt like it had been sharpened by his hands. He wasn't trying to punish her. He was just doing his job, and that killed her. Because he had moved on, and she was still stuck in the space between her pride and her longing. Midweek, her assistant Danielle stopped by with her schedule and paused at the door. You all right, Ms. Monroe? Celeste looked up. Why do you ask? Danielle hesitated. You've been quieter than usual. Celeste nodded. Just focused. Danielle didn't push. All right, let me know if you need anything. As the door closed, Celeste exhaled slowly. Her silence was starting to echo. By Friday, whispers floated. People noticed how often Celeste avoided the lounge, how she never asked Cairo direct questions in meetings anymore, how she dismissed 2 of his proposals without much feedback. It wasn't personal, not to them, but to Celeste. Everything was personal now. She was unraveling, not with tears, but with distance. Even her assistant noticed. Your calendar's clear for the afternoon. Want me to move your next call? Celeste nodded. Please. She sat back in her chair, staring at the wall where their team photo hung. Cairo stood 3 people away from her. Even then, his hands were folded neatly, his eyes steady, his smile subtle. She wondered if he knew he'd already begun guarding himself. That night, she stayed late again. Rain again, of course. She walked down the hallway, lights low, expecting an empty space. But the design lab door was cracked again. She knew better this time, but she walked in anyway. He was there, alone. Again, pencil between his fingers, a new concept on the table. He looked up. This time, he didn't smile. Neither did she. I'm thinking of taking you off the Portland pitch, she said plainly. His brow lifted, slow. May I ask why? She shrugged. Rebalancing the load. He nodded once. Noted. He didn't argue, didn't fight for it. She waited, expecting him to. He didn't. He simply packed up his folder, slid it into his bag and said, If there's nothing else, have a good night. She didn't answer. And he didn't wait. The following Monday, HR received a notice. From Celeste. Staff reassignment request, effective immediately. Reason, department restructure. The next day, Cairo's desk was cleared. He was gone. No farewell lunch, no Slack goodbye. Just a folded note on her desk, signed with his initials, "You let pride win, and now we both lose." Celeste stared at the note for a long time. Read it, folded it, opened it again. There were no insults, no bitterness, just truth. Sharp, bare, unforgiving. He didn't call her cold, didn't blame her for firing him. He blamed them both for what they didn't say. Her chest tightened as she slipped the note into her drawer. She opened her laptop, typed Cairo's name in the firm's records. Deactivated. She closed the tab. Then she finally let herself cry, softly, alone. 2 months passed. 2 award nominations. 1 record-breaking pitch, win. 3 features in national architecture publications. Celeste Munro was thriving. On paper, the media loved the numbers. Black woman redefines West Coast urban design. Munro Design Group. Hits 7-figure quarter. She's not just a CEO, she's a movement. Every headline made her shoulders stiffen a little more. Because what the articles didn't say, she hadn't slept a full night in weeks. Her calendar was packed. Back-to-back meetings, strategy reviews, new market expansions. She traveled more, smiled more, dressed sharper. She was louder in boardrooms, colder in one-on-ones, sharper in her email feedback. And no one dared question her, because success excused everything, even pain. Her team started adjusting without instructions. Danielle, her assistant, stopped scheduling anything before 10 a.m. Jasmine rerouted client check-ins through operations. The design staff took the hint. Don't ask too many questions. Don't share too much. Keep things moving. Celeste didn't notice the distance growing. Or maybe she did, and liked it that way. Distance protected her. From questions, from weakness, from vulnerability. On a Tuesday morning, during a client strategy call, Celeste corrected one of her senior designers mid-sentence. He blinked. "Apologies, I thought we had aligned." "We're not paid to assume," she replied, tone flat. "We're paid to deliver." The Zoom room went quiet. The client coughed. "Right. Well, the timeline works for us." Celeste nodded. "Good. We'll follow up with specs by Thursday." She ended the call and turned to Jasmine. "You need something?" Jasmine hesitated. "Actually, no." She left. The silence that followed felt like success. Until Celeste realized she had no one to share it with. That night, she sat in her corner office, lights low, eyes burning from screen time. She opened the firm's internal dashboard. Something caught her eye. A drop in staff satisfaction. The anonymous quarterly survey showed a 13% decline. Comments like, "We miss the way things used to feel. Great company, but colder leadership lately. Feels like we're chasing perfection without purpose." She closed the browser. She didn't want to see more. At home, her apartment felt too big. She poured wine, sat on the balcony, watched the city lights blink through the rain. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend in Chicago. "Girl, you ever gonna come visit? Or are you married to that office chair?" Celeste smiled. Barely. She didn't reply. She didn't have the words. She hadn't even told her friend about Cairo. What would she say? "I broke my own rules, and then fired the only man who ever made me feel real." No, she buried that too, right next to the note still hidden in her desk drawer. On Wednesday, Celeste sat in on a junior review. A new hire, about Cairo's age, presented a housing model. It was good, smart, clean, safe, but it lacked something. Soul. She gave short notes, dismissed the group. But as she watched them leave, her chest ached. Because 2 months ago, Cairo would have added something bold. He always pushed just enough. Enough to make the design breathe. Now everything felt correct, perfect, and flat. That Friday, Danielle hesitated in the doorway. Quick reminder, "You're set to speak at the Women in Architecture panel next Thursday," she said. Celeste looked up. "Right." Danielle paused. "Want me to decline?" Celeste raised a brow. "Why would you?" Danielle's voice lowered. "Because you've been a little stretched." Celeste stared. Then she nodded once. "Decline it." Danielle nodded back, lips pressed. Celeste turned to her laptop again, but the cancellation sat heavy in her stomach. Later that evening, she passed by the firm's empty design room, the one where Cairo used to stay late, where she had first confronted him, where she had last heard his voice. It was silent now, sterile, clean. The table was bare. The corkboard blank. The space untouched. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her. She ran her fingers over the desk. Her hand paused near the corner, a faint scratch carved into the wood. EC. Cairo's initials, subtle, hidden, but still there. Her throat tightened. She sat down in his old chair. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to admit it. She missed him. Celeste didn't cry that night. She didn't scream or rage or fall apart in her car like a woman in a movie. She sat still in the dark design room, hands on her lap, eyes locked on the faint scratch in the table. EC. He hadn't even used his full name. Just initials, a quiet mark, like he knew he wasn't staying. Or maybe he didn't expect to be remembered. Celeste stood up, walked out, and didn't turn on the lights behind her. Over the next few weeks, she filled the silence with motion. She accepted interviews she'd previously declined, sat on panels, spoke at leadership summits. Her name continued to rise. So did the tension in her chest. She found herself snapping at minor things. A typo in a slide deck. A junior architect not formatting an email header properly. The way someone said her name with too much familiarity. Each moment built like steam under a lid. And no one dared to check her. Until one Friday afternoon, she walked into the break room and found Danielle, Jasmine, and 2 other employees huddled around coffee. They stopped talking the moment she entered. The kind of pause that doesn't need words. She nodded, grabbed her tea, and left without comment. But in her chest, it stung. Not because she needed to be liked, but because she knew what that pause meant. They were talking about her. And not with admiration. That night, she opened her dating app for the first time in months. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Maybe a distraction. Maybe a conversation. Maybe someone who didn't know what she'd lost. She matched with a man named Miles. Corporate consultant. Lived in Capitol Hill. Liked jazz and hiking. They met for drinks that Sunday. He was attractive. Polished. Charming. He complimented her dress. Opened her door. Asked about her work. She told him the basics. That she ran a design firm. That things were good. He smiled. A powerhouse. I like that. But 20 minutes in, she realized something. She hadn't thought about Cairo all day. Until that sentence. Powerhouse. That's what Cairo used to call her in his sketches. Your mind works like steel, he once said. But your eyes say you're tired of holding it all. She excused herself halfway through dessert. Miles was kind. Said they could try again. She nodded. Blocked him the next day. The following week, she took a call with a New York investor. He pitched a collaboration, a design firm merger. Monroe Design East, he offered. We'd handle the finance. You'd control all design and build decisions. It should have excited her. Instead, she blinked at the screen. All she could think was, would Cairo have challenged this pitch? Would he have said, sure, it looks smart, but are they buying your vision or just your image? She didn't know, because she'd erased the only person who ever spoke to her with honesty that didn't feel like criticism. The next morning, Celeste walked through the design wing. She paused at the main corkboard wall. A collection of current projects, mock-ups, idea clippings. It looked beautiful, perfect, symmetrical, safe and dead. No sketches hanging at odd angles. No bold color pins. No handwritten questions like, what if this was wrong on purpose? That had always been Cairo's thing. He'd tack sticky notes on others' renderings, asking, is this all we've got? Not to insult, but to inspire. Now, it was quiet, predictable. She stepped back and felt a chill. They were winning, but they weren't growing. And neither was she. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake in bed, phone screen dark, curtains open, city blinking in the distance. She thought about the last time she saw Cairo's hands, not on her skin, but on a pencil, sketching with focus, not fear, moving lines into form with grace. She remembered the way he used to tilt his head when he asked a hard question, the slight curve in his lips when she said something bold. He was gone, but he hadn't just taken himself. He took the color, and maybe she let him. It started with a notebook, black leather, thin pages, no label. Celeste found it one evening while cleaning her office, tucked behind a row of archived portfolios. It wasn't hers. She opened the cover. The handwriting was unmistakable. Cairo's, page after page of sketches, ideas, notes in the margins. One line stood out. Design isn't just about what we build. It's about what we're afraid to destroy. She sat down. The city outside faded. The silence in the room shifted. She had come in to clean her shelf, but what she found was herself. Or at least, the part she'd abandoned when she let him walk out. The next morning, Celeste stood in the middle of the team floor. Not in her usual heels and silk blouse, but jeans and a grey sweater. No announcement. No calendar slot. People glanced up from their screens. She cleared her throat. I need 10 minutes of everyone's time, she said. Voices stopped. Chairs turned. Celeste looked across the faces of her staff, most surprised, some guarded. I started this firm because I wanted to build something that would outlive me, she began. But lately, I think I've been leading it in a way that erases what made it alive. The room stayed quiet. I've been rigid, distant, focused on numbers and optics. And I forgot that the best designs are the ones that challenge you. So starting next week, we're doing things differently. Someone whispered. Someone straightened in their seat. Celeste continued. The open lounge will now be a creative lab. No deadlines, no clients, just ideas. Every Thursday afternoon, that room is yours. And mine. Gasps. A few raised eyebrows. And I'm adding a policy change, she added. Vulnerability isn't a threat to professionalism. It's part of the process. We lead with empathy now, including me. She paused. I expect excellence, but I no longer expect perfection. Silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then a few more. Celeste smiled, small but real. She didn't cry. She didn't break. She bent, and that's when she started to heal. That afternoon, Jasmine stepped into her office. Boss, that was unexpected, she said, closing the door behind her. I know, Celeste replied, but it was good, honest. Celeste looked at her. Too late? Jasmine shook her head. Not if you keep going. Celeste nodded. I plan to. Later that week, she received an email from the Women in Architecture panel she had cancelled. We'd still love to have you. New date. More personal stories. Would you reconsider? She replied, yes, I have something to say now. That weekend, Celeste took the long drive up to Bainbridge Island. No calls. No schedule. Just space. She brought the notebook with her, sat by the shore, flipped to the page where Cairo had sketched a bridge. Not a literal one, but an abstract one. A concept piece she remembered dismissing months ago. In the corner, he had written, even strong structures fall apart without connection. She closed the notebook, pressed it to her chest, whispered, I'm sorry. And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. Monday came, but something was different. Celeste no longer hid in her corner office behind frosted glass. She walked the floor again, paused by desks, asked questions, listened. Not to correct, to understand. The staff took notice, and slowly, without a memo or formal announcement, the energy inside Monroe Design Group shifted. People smiled again. Music played softly in the lounge. New sketches appeared on the corkboards, bold ones, strange ones, unfinished ones. Mistakes were seen as ideas in motion. The place had heart again. And so did she. On Thursday, the first creative lab kicked off. Celeste arrived early. No clipboard, no assistant, just her sketchbook. When a junior designer hesitated near the supply table, Celeste smiled and waved her over. "First time sketching off script?" she asked. The young woman nodded. "I'm used to just following layout specs." "Not today," Celeste said. "Today, you follow instinct." The designer beamed. It was small, but Celeste felt it in her chest. This was what she'd lost. This was what she could rebuild. That weekend, the panel event took place downtown. Women from across industries gathered to speak on leadership and resilience. Celeste wore her signature black, but softer, hair pinned back, a silver necklace from her late mother. When her turn came, she stepped onto the stage. She didn't start with her resume. She didn't mention awards or projects. She said, "I once fired the only person who ever challenged me because I was afraid of what it meant to feel." The room went still. I thought leading meant never bending, never exposing anything that might look like uncertainty. But what I've learned is this: vulnerability doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And if your team never sees your heart, they'll never trust your direction. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, not because she was powerful, but because she was real. 2 days later, she received a call from a friend in Portland. "Have you seen the speaker lineup for the Northwest Design Expo next month?" Celeste sipped her coffee. "No." "Why?" There was a pause. "Cairo Ellis is headlining." Her hand froze around the mug. Her friend added, "He's speaking on freedom in form." "I think you'd want to hear it." Celeste closed her eyes. Of course he was. Of course he'd grown. Created something bigger from the silence. And now, fate was putting them in the same room again. Has pride ever made you let go of someone before you were ready? Have you ever changed, only to realize the person you hurt had already moved on? Drop a comment below and share your moment. And if this story is hitting somewhere deep, like, share, and subscribe. Because stories like this, they're not just entertainment, they're reminders. Celeste sat by her office window late Friday evening, watching the lights across the city flicker in distant patterns. The press release for the Northwest Design Expo had landed on her desk hours earlier. She hadn't opened it until everyone else left. Her fingers hovered over the headline at the top of the flyer. Keynote speaker, Cairo Ellis, founder, Ellis Concepts. There it was. His name, bold, centered, as if the city had been waiting to see it all along. It felt surreal. She had just started breathing right again, just found her rhythm. And now, he was echoing through her world again, not as a regret, not as a man she once knew, but as a force, a voice, a presence others were now listening to. Part of her felt pride. The rest? A slow ache under her ribs. She hadn't seen him in months. Not in person. Not even online. He wasn't the type to flaunt his wins. But she knew, deep down, this was no lucky break. He had worked for this, like she had, like they both had. The expo was in Portland. 1 weekend, 2 panels, 1 keynote, dozens of faces she knew, and hundreds she didn't. She could have easily passed on it, sent a team rep, blamed scheduling. But something in her resisted the excuse. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe she wasn't done. By Monday morning, her assistant had already prepped the logistics. Flights, hotel, press badge, outfit details, the works. But Celeste barely glanced at the itinerary. Her mind wasn't on the event. It was on the chance of seeing him, and what she'd say if she did. That thought kept her up for 2 nights straight. She didn't want to make a scene, didn't want a dramatic confrontation. She didn't even want closure. That word sounded too neat, too final. She just wanted to see his eyes again, to know if he still remembered. The morning of the flight, she stood in front of her mirror, holding 2 blazers. Black, the armor she always wore. Ivory, softer, looser, not quite her usual choice. She surprised herself and chose the ivory. On the flight to Portland, she reviewed her talking points for her breakout panel. The words blurred on the screen. She kept rewriting her introduction, kept imagining his face in the crowd. What would she say if he stopped by her room backstage? Would he say her name? Would he hesitate? Would he speak at all? She shut the laptop and stared out the window. The city came into view below. Clean, crisp, bright, different from Seattle. Quieter, somehow. As she stepped off the plane, the air hit her different. Not just because it was colder, because it felt like walking into memory. The convention center was already buzzing by the time she arrived. Banners hung high, press kits handed out, camera crews setting up. Celeste was escorted to a private lounge. Staff greeted her like royalty. Smiles, cameras, a microphone clipped to her blouse for sound check. But behind every flash of light, she kept scanning the room. Not yet. He wasn't here. Or maybe he was, and deliberately staying out of reach. Her panel went smoothly. She spoke about innovative design in underrepresented communities, shared the new creative lab model she introduced back home. The audience loved it. They clapped, took notes, quoted her. She should have felt proud. But every second she stood under the spotlight, she knew who wasn't watching. After the panel, a journalist from a design magazine stopped her near the refreshments. "Ms. Monroe, your firm's approach to empathy-driven structure is changing the industry," the reporter said, excitement in her voice. Funny enough, Cairo Ellis said something similar last month in a podcast. Celeste blinked. "Really?" The woman nodded. He said empathy was the bridge between structure and soul. Said it's something he learned the hard way. Said a woman taught him that. Celeste's chest tightened. Did he mention her name? The woman laughed softly. No, but from the way he said it, I doubt he ever forgot her. Celeste smiled, barely, then excused herself. She stepped outside. The cold hit her cheeks immediately. She didn't care. She needed air. She needed stillness. She needed to stop pretending like she wasn't holding her breath since she landed. She pulled out her phone, opened a blank note, typed 1 line. "If I see you again, I won't walk away this time." She saved it, then deleted it, then opened it again. The door behind her opened. A familiar voice spoke, low, steady, closer than she expected. "You always take calls outside?" Celeste froze. She turned slowly, and there he was. Cairo, hands in his coat pocket, eyes calm, shoulders relaxed. That same quiet energy that once steadied her in chaos. She couldn't speak, neither could he. For a full 10 seconds, silence reigned. Then he said, "Didn't think you'd come." "I wasn't sure I would," she replied, voice even. He stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough to be felt. "You look," he began, then stopped. "You look like you." She smiled softly. "So do you." He nodded. Another silence, this one heavier. She spoke first. "Congratulations, by the way. Headlining a design expo? That's big." "Thanks," he said. "Didn't think they'd ask." "Still don't know why I said yes." "Maybe because you belong here," she replied. He looked at her. This time, really looked. "You said something once," he said. "You told me that control was how you survived. I didn't understand it then. And now?" He exhaled. "Now I think it's how I lost you." Celeste blinked. "You didn't lose me, Cairo. We let go of each other." He nodded. "Fair." She looked down, then back up. I heard about what you said on that podcast, she added, about a woman teaching you empathy. He tilted his head. She taught me a lot. Some lessons I learned too late. They stood in the cold, city traffic humming faintly in the background. Finally, he asked, "Are you staying for the keynote?" She hesitated. "Do you want me to?" His gaze softened. "Yeah, I do." She nodded once. "I'll be there." He gave her a small, grateful smile. Then he walked back inside. And this time, she watched him go, but not with regret. With readiness. Because some moments don't need closure. Some need courage. And this time, she had it. Celeste entered the auditorium 10 minutes before the keynote began. The lights were dimmed low, except for the stage, where the Ellis Concepts banner stood tall, clean, and striking in black and copper tones. She chose a seat near the middle, not too close, not too hidden. Her heart beat louder than the applause that broke out when Cairo walked onto the stage. He didn't speak right away. He stood there, hands by his side, eyes scanning the crowd slowly, not searching for her, but acknowledging every face. When he spoke, his voice wasn't rehearsed. It was grounded. "Good evening. I'm Cairo Ellis. I'm not here to teach you anything. Just here to tell the truth about what design taught me." A quiet laugh moved through the room. He clicked the remote. A sketch appeared on the screen. It wasn't architectural. It was abstract, unbalanced, but it had weight. Most people think structure is about strength, that if it doesn't stand tall and clean, it's broken. But I've come to believe strength also comes from bend, not just in material, but in the people behind it. The audience leaned in. Cairo continued, his voice steady. "I spent a lot of time designing to impress, building things that looked perfect, until someone asked me why they didn't feel real. I couldn't answer then. Another sketch appeared, a building with asymmetry, lived in, beautiful, but not flawless. This is when I started to understand that design, like relationships, isn't about control. It's about trust, about leaving room for what might surprise you." Celeste felt her throat tighten. He wasn't telling her story. He was telling his, but she was in every line of it. Near the end, he paused on a blank screen. No structure survives without tension. But the ones that endure, they're the ones where both sides hold weight, equally, even when it hurts. The room went still. Then came the applause. And Celeste clapped too. Not out of politeness, out of something deeper. Pride, maybe, or something close to peace. After the keynote, people rushed him, designers, students, execs. He handled them all with ease. Smiles, nods, warm words. Celeste stood near the edge of the room, watching him from a distance. She didn't move toward him. She waited, and after 20 minutes he turned, eyes searching. Then they met hers. He excused himself and walked over. "Thought you might slip out," he said gently. "I almost did." He smiled. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for saying what I didn't know I needed to hear." Cairo nodded. "There's more I want to say." Celeste looked up. "I'm listening." He glanced at the crowd, then back at her. "Not here, not like this. You free tonight?" A breath caught in her throat. "I am." He nodded again, quieter this time. "There's a rooftop near the riverside. Nothing fancy, just space and silence." She smiled. "You always did like rooftops. And you always did look best under soft light." She blushed, the first time in years. He didn't push further. "I'll send you the address." And he walked away, leaving her standing in the aftermath of something she couldn't name yet. But it felt real. At 8:15, she stepped onto the rooftop. The city was lit in gold. The air cool but not harsh. Cairo stood near the edge, jacket off, sleeves rolled. A small table set with tea and fruit. Simple, intentional, like everything he did. "You came," he said. Celeste walked to him. "You asked." They sat. No rush. No pretense. He poured her tea. Not wine. Not coffee, tea. She noticed. "So," he began, "should I apologize for leaving the way I did?" She shook her head. "No. You left because I fired you. I left emotionally long before that," he said. "I was scared. So was I." They sipped. Wind passed between them. "You weren't just my boss," he said. "You were the first person who ever looked at my work and saw my fear beneath the ambition." Celeste lowered her eyes. "And you were the first man who didn't treat my strength like a threat." Cairo looked at her. "Still isn't." She smiled, slow, full. They sat in that pause for what felt like a lifetime. Then she asked, "What happens now?" He shrugged. "Honest. We talk. We don't run. We try. And if it falls apart, then at least this time it didn't end because we let silence speak louder than the truth." Celeste reached across the table. He met her halfway. Fingers touched. No fireworks. Just warmth. And maybe something new beginning. Celeste didn't expect anything the next morning. Not a text. Not a phone call. Not a promise. But when her phone buzzed at 7:42 a.m., she stared at the screen longer than she should have. "Cairo, hope you made it back okay. Let me know when you're home, and when you're ready to talk more." She read it twice. Once for the words. Once for the care buried beneath them. No pressure, no assumption. Just presence. She replied with something simple. "I'm home. I'm ready." And for the first time in a long time, that was true. They didn't fall back into anything. There was no rushing. No declarations. No bedroom scenes laced in guilt or desperation. There were phone calls, early morning walks. A shared playlist passed between them. She sent him photos of her sketchbook. He sent her voice notes when an idea struck him late at night. They rebuilt, not like lovers trying to reclaim fire, but like old friends relearning each other's rhythms. And for Celeste, that slow unraveling felt more intimate than anything they'd shared before. 3 weeks after the rooftop night, she met him for lunch on a quiet patio in Queen Anne. He was already seated when she arrived, legs crossed, eyes scanning a book. She sat down without a word. He smiled without lifting his head. "You look lighter," he said. She laughed softly. "You say that like I was made of bricks." "You were," he replied, setting the book down. "But you carried them like armor." She didn't deny it. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She nodded. "When you fired me, was it about me or about you?" Celeste didn't flinch. "It was about control. I needed to prove I still had it. That night left me exposed." He nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She reached for her water. "What about you? Was it easier to pretend it meant nothing?" He stared at the lemon slice floating in his glass. "At the time, yes. It gave me distance, made it hurt less. And now?" He looked her in the eye. "Now I know it just made me a coward." There was no tension between them, no anger, only the kind of stillness that comes after 2 storms. "I don't want to redo what we had," she said. He leaned forward. "Neither do I." She smiled. "Good, because what we have now," he added, "feels worth protecting." They didn't label anything. There were no couple photos, no social media hints, no company whispers. They protected what they were building. Celeste still ran Monroe Design. Cairo still ran Ellis Concepts. They worked on opposite ends of the industry, but every now and then they met in the middle. Sometimes at networking events, sometimes in private, but each time their conversations deepened. Cairo asked questions no one else dared to ask her. "What are you afraid of if you fail now? Do you even like what you've built? When's the last time you did something that had nothing to do with proving people wrong?" And she answered, slowly, truthfully, sometimes through tears, sometimes through silence. He didn't fix her. He stayed near her healing. That, to Celeste, was more sacred than anything else. Late one night, she called him. "I want to build something new," she said. Cairo didn't ask for details. He simply said, "I'm listening." Celeste paused. "Not a project, a space." He waited. "A non-profit hub," she continued, "where young black creatives can come and design freely. No pitch, no pressure, just creativity with dignity." Cairo was quiet for a long beat. "Then, you want help?" Celeste smiled. "I want you involved, not because of us, but because you know what it feels like to be overlooked." He responded in the softest voice he had. "Then I'm in, all the way." They began sketching together again, over coffee, on rooftops, at her office on Sundays when no one else was around. Their ideas didn't always match. Their visions sometimes clashed. But this time, they listened. Not to respond, to understand, and the work blossomed. So did their connection. Not dramatic, not explosive, just rooted. Celeste often found herself watching him when he wasn't looking. How he tilted his head while thinking. How he tapped his pen 3 times before speaking. How his laugh always started in his chest and ended in his eyes. It was in those moments she realized something. She didn't love Cairo for what he brought into her world. She loved him for how he stayed when her world began to soften. 2 months later, the non-profit concept was no longer an idea. It had a name, a location, and a growing list of potential donors. The Sanctum. Celeste chose the name herself, not because it sounded elegant, because it meant protection, for young designers, for creativity, for hearts like hers that once needed a quiet place to exhale. The downtown location was perfect, a worn-down studio building with high ceilings, exposed beams, and energy humming beneath every cracked window frame. Celeste secured the lease. Cairo drew up early renderings. Together, they shaped the vision like sculptors with bare hands. They weren't lovers playing architect. They were architects building something bigger than love. But then, the tension returned. Not from between them, but from outside. One of Celeste's oldest investors, a venture capitalist named Roland Miles, called her in for a private meeting. They met in a high-rise conference room, sunlit and expensive. He poured scotch. She declined. Roland got straight to the point. "You're in demand, Celeste. I've got 2 East Coast firms ready to merge. The deal will triple your valuation overnight." She blinked. "You want me to sell Monroe Design?" "Not sell," he said smoothly. "Evolve. Expand. You'll still have creative control, but you'll be part of a larger umbrella, less pressure, bigger reach." She stayed quiet. Roland leaned forward. "And let's be honest, you've been distracted lately. Non-profits don't build empires." Her face didn't change. "Empires for who?" "Legacy," he replied. "You've built one already. Don't let it stall chasing passion projects." Celeste stood. "It's not a passion project, it's a promise." "To who?" She stared at him. "To myself." She left without shaking his hand. Outside, the city moved like it didn't care what decisions she was weighing. But her hands were shaking as she sat in her car, because Roland wasn't wrong. The merger could change her life, elevate her name beyond Seattle, give her the platform she once dreamed of. But the Sanctum, that wasn't about visibility. That was about impact. And more than that, it was hers and Cairo's. Together, she called him that evening. He answered on the second ring. "You okay?" he asked, like he already knew she wasn't. "Roland offered me an expansion deal," she said. "Let me guess," Cairo replied. "He wants to fold you into his machine. He says the non-profit will slow me down." A pause. "Do you believe that?" Cairo asked. Celeste looked out the window. "I don't know." She expected him to push, to remind her of their dream, to beg her not to trade it away. But he didn't. He said, "Then take time. I won't try to convince you. If we're building the Sanctum together, it can't be out of guilt, only conviction." She closed her eyes. This was why she cared about him. He didn't manipulate her feelings. He respected her decisions, even when they threatened to unmake everything they were building. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about power, legacy, freedom, and the version of herself that used to believe you couldn't have all three. The next morning, she stood in front of the half-painted wall inside the sanctum's shell. Dust in the air, her hair tied back, sweat on her neck. Cairo was already there, jeans stained with primer, hands smudged with graphite. He didn't ask for her answer. She handed him a paper cup of black coffee, then said quietly, "We're not merging." He turned, blinking. "You sure?" "No empire is worth building if I lose the foundation," she said. "And this place? This is the only thing I've built lately that feels honest." He smiled, slow and deep. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." She touched his chest, lightly. "And I don't want to lose you again." "You won't," he whispered. And for once, she believed him. By the end of the week, they had a grant application approved. A local bank pledged startup capital. 3 mentees signed up to work under their guidance. A local artist offered to paint a mural on the entrance wall. It was happening. Not fast, but real. And Celeste realized something else. She wasn't just rebuilding her heart. She was rebuilding her identity, not as a woman who needed to be untouchable, but as a woman who chose connection without apology. Cairo never tried to take the lead. He matched her step for step. When she faltered, he offered a steady hand. When she soared, he watched with quiet awe. One night, as they sat under the half-lit canopy of the sanctum's rooftop, Cairo turned to her and said, "You know, I never needed you to fix anything." Celeste looked at him. "I know. I just needed to know I wasn't disposable." Her voice cracked. "You never were." He leaned closer. "Then we're good." She kissed him gently, not like a woman making up for lost time, but like a woman who finally stopped running from what she'd always wanted. The sanctum was weeks away from its soft launch. The space was nearly complete, floors redone, walls painted, desks installed. Local news had picked up on the story, calling it a fresh answer to an old problem in the creative space. People were finally paying attention. Celeste stood near the front door one afternoon, watching a young intern pin mood boards to a cork wall. It was quiet inside, full of promise. Every piece of the sanctum reflected who she had become. But that piece shattered at 3:07 p.m. Danielle called her. She never called during site visits. Celeste stepped into the back room and answered. "What's wrong?" Danielle's voice was strained. "I think you need to read this now, before it spreads." Her heart thudded. A moment later, the link hit her inbox. Blog post. Anonymous source. Gossip site. Former Monroe design staffer speaks. CEO fired man after crossing the line, then launched a non-profit with him months later. Celeste's hands went cold. The article wasn't detailed. It didn't use names, but it implied enough that a junior employee and a certain powerful Seattle woman had an inappropriate workplace relationship. That said employee was let go quietly. That now, she was launching a non-profit with the same man, funded in part by public grants and community support. It was poison wrapped in speculation, and it could destroy everything. She called Cairo. He picked up fast. "Hey, what's—" "You need to see this," she cut in. "Check your email." He was silent for several seconds. Then his breath caught. "Who sent this in?" "I don't know, but it's out." Cairo's voice hardened. "We've done nothing wrong." "We didn't break any laws," Celeste replied. "But you know how this works. Public perception doesn't wait for facts." He paused. "So, what do we do?" She closed her eyes. "We get ahead of it." By morning, the article had reached local news circuits. Social media picked it up. No one had proof. But the implication was enough to spark judgment. Celeste's inbox was flooded with concerned messages. Some clients from Monroe Design stayed silent. One pulled out of a bid process. The Sanctum's grant officer requested a review meeting. Urgent. It was spiraling. Fast. Cairo texted her before their meeting. Don't protect me. If they want to pull my name, I'll back out. Just say the word. She stared at that message for minutes. He was offering her an easy exit, an out, but it wasn't right. Because if she distanced herself now, she wouldn't just lose him, she'd lose herself again. Celeste arrived at the grant office at noon. The panel, 3 people, all visibly concerned, handed her a copy of the article, printed and underlined. Ms. Monroe, the lead officer began, we understand that this is speculation, but it does raise questions about your decision-making and governance as a non-profit leader, especially if there was a prior power imbalance. Celeste nodded once. I understand. What can you tell us about this man's departure from your firm? Celeste took a deep breath, and then she told the truth. I had a relationship with Cairo Ellis while he was an employee at Monroe Design, she said. It wasn't planned, it wasn't public. When it began affecting my judgment, I made a decision, one I now regret. The panel looked at each other. I fired him to protect the business, but in doing so I also silenced something I wasn't ready to face, that I cared about him, deeply. More than I knew at the time. One of the women on the panel leaned in. And now you work together? Yes, Celeste said. We co-lead the Sanctum. We work in full transparency. We have no formal contracts between us, no hidden shares. Everything is documented, reviewed, traceable. The room was quiet. Then Celeste added, You're right to ask questions, but I won't lie to you to protect an image. If being human disqualifies me from doing this work, then so be it. But I won't build a space for truth while hiding mine. After the meeting, she sat alone in the lobby, hands shaking. But something in her chest felt lighter. For the first time, she hadn't protected herself with distance. She told the truth and let it land. Cairo met her outside. He didn't speak. He just hugged her, tight, solid, without hesitation. I was ready to walk, he said softly into her shoulder. But I'm glad you didn't let me. She pulled back. I almost did. But you didn't, he replied. And now we wait. The next morning, she received a short email from the panel. Subject, Sanctum Grant Status Body. Funding remains approved. We appreciate your honesty. Let's move forward. Celeste didn't cry. She smiled, then picked up the phone and called Cairo. We survived it. He exhaled. So we keep building? Yes, she said. Together. The headlines faded in a week. The internet moved on, as it always does. The Sanctum continued its quiet rise. The grant stayed in place. Community partners reached out in support. Some even praised Celeste for owning her truth without apology. Inside the space, the energy shifted. The staff stood a little taller. The interns asked bolder questions. The walls filled with sketches and vision boards that breathed. And for Celeste and Cairo, something else changed. They no longer second-guessed what they were building, together or separately. Every decision was made with intention. Every touch came with trust. Every yes felt earned. They weren't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. They were just showing up for each other, and that made the difference. One Thursday afternoon, Celeste walked into the Sanctum with lunch in hand. She found Cairo in the back room, reviewing concept drafts from the mentorship team. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. You're early, he said. I bribed myself with Thai food, she replied, holding the bag up. He stood, stretched, and walked over. You spoil me. I owe you, she said softly. For what? For staying when it would have been easier to leave. He touched her cheek. You don't owe me anything. I stayed because I wanted to. She leaned into his hand. Then she asked, Do you ever think about what we would have been if we hadn't broken the rules that night? Cairo didn't flinch. Sometimes. But then I remember, breaking the rules is how we found the truth. She nodded. Still, it almost cost us everything. And now, he said, smiling, we're building something with nothing to hide behind. Have you ever made a decision that almost cost you someone important? Ever had to choose between protecting your image or protecting what felt real? Drop a comment and tell us what you would have done in Celeste's shoes. And if you're still reading, still watching, still feeling this story, like, share, and subscribe. Because at Mr. Charles Stories, we don't just tell stories. We tell the kind that leave a mark. That evening, as the team packed up and the sun cast gold streaks across the windows, Celeste and Cairo sat on the bench just outside. No laptops, no paperwork. Just them. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He rested his hand on her thigh, calm and familiar. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think love had to be hidden to survive. I used to think love made you weak," he replied. They both chuckled. "Turns out," Celeste said, "real love doesn't need hiding or proof. Just honesty," he added. And then, footsteps from the other end of the block. A figure approached slowly. Tall, female, mid-30s, well-dressed but casual. Cairo sat up straighter. Celeste noticed instantly. "You okay?" He stood. The woman came closer, pausing a few feet away. "Cairo," she said quietly. He blinked. "Avery." Celeste stood now too. "You know her?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "We were engaged before I moved to Seattle." Celeste's heart dropped. Not from jealousy, but from the unexpected wave of old shadows breaking through the light. "I didn't mean to just show up," Avery said. "But when I heard what you were doing here, I had to see it." Cairo glanced at Celeste, then back at Avery. "What do you want?" he asked gently. Avery looked down. "Closure. And maybe a second chance to explain why I left the way I did." Celeste said nothing. Cairo didn't move, and the wind carried silence between the three of them, full of past choices, present tensions, and a future now uncertain. Celeste didn't say anything for the first full minute after Avery walked away. She watched the woman disappear down the street, her steps confident yet cautious, like someone who had more to say but knew she wasn't owed the space to say it yet. Cairo stood beside her, his hands tucked in his pockets. His jaw was tight, but his shoulders sagged, the way they do when history catches up to you without warning. Celeste broke the silence. "How long has it been since you saw her?" He exhaled. 3 years, maybe more. "She just vanished." He nodded. "We were engaged, living in Oakland. I got accepted into the master's program in Seattle. She said she'd follow after her contract ended. Then one day, I came home and her key was on the counter." Celeste blinked. "No explanation? Just a note. Said she wasn't ready. Said I was chasing something bigger than us. And now she shows up? But I didn't know she was even in the city." Celeste looked away. "Do you still feel anything for her?" Cairo hesitated. That pause didn't surprise her. It hurt anyway. "I don't know what I feel," he admitted. "Just caught off guard." Celeste nodded slowly. "That's fair." But inside, something old stirred. A fear she hadn't felt in months. The fear of not being enough. That night, Celeste didn't bring it up again. She cooked dinner, poured wine, and tried to focus on the latest sketches for the next phase of the sanctum. Cairo was quiet but present. He helped dice vegetables. He pressed play on her favorite playlist. He didn't retreat. But he also didn't unpack the weight he was carrying. And she didn't ask. Not yet. Because some questions need space before answers feel safe. 3 days passed. Celeste stayed busy at the firm. She approved 3 proposals, fired 1 vendor, and prepped a speech for a design fellowship gala. But her thoughts kept circling back to one thing. Not Avery's return, but Cairo's silence. He wasn't distant. He wasn't hiding. But something inside him had gone quiet. That stillness felt louder than any confession. On Thursday, she received a delivery at the sanctum. A leather portfolio. No sender. Inside were original concept sketches for the Oakland project Cairo once worked on, signed by Avery Carson. On top of the sketches was a folded note. "These were yours too. I took them when I left. I never stopped admiring what you built, even if I walked away from it." I just wanted you to know I believed in you, even from far away." Celeste stared at the note for a long time. She didn't read it twice. She placed it back in the envelope and walked to the back office. Cairo was there, reviewing construction receipts. She handed him the envelope. He recognized the handwriting instantly. He sat back, opened it slowly, and read in silence. When he finished, he didn't speak. Celeste leaned against the doorframe. "Is this what you need to handle privately?" He looked up. His face wasn't confused. It was clear, calm. "No, it's not private, not anymore." She stepped in. Cairo stood, walked to the window, let the sunlight fall over his face. "I loved her once," he said. "We were safe together, until I started growing and she didn't want to grow with me." Celeste said nothing. "She saw my ambition as a threat," he continued. "She used to say, 'You're always trying to be something more. Can't we just be enough?' And I started thinking maybe my hunger for more was wrong." He turned to her. "You never made me feel that way. You challenged me, but you never tried to shrink me." Celeste finally spoke. "So, what do you want now?" "I want to meet her once. Say what wasn't said." She swallowed. "And if that opens something up again?" Cairo walked to her, slow and certain. He touched her wrist. "Then I'll shut it down before it ever starts. Not because of guilt. No," he said, "because I've already found the one who stood still and grew beside me." Celeste held his gaze. She didn't ask for proof. His words were enough. Later that day, Cairo met Avery at a downtown cafe. Celeste didn't wait by the phone. She went to the sanctum, reviewed mentor applications, laughed with a mentee who spilled paint all over the floor. She didn't pace. She didn't worry. Because love, real love, is tested not by storms, but by how calmly it stands through them. At 6:42 p.m., Cairo texted, "It's done. No drama, no fire. Just final words that should have happened years ago. You free for dinner?" Celeste replied, "Always." Dinner was quiet at first, not tense, not awkward, just soft, unrushed. Cairo poured Celeste's water before his own. She passed him the grilled vegetables before he asked. They had fallen into a rhythm not based on performance, but presence. After the plates were cleared, they walked outside, letting the cool evening wind wrap around them like a thin blanket of peace. Celeste waited until they reached the corner before she asked, "So, how was it?" Cairo didn't pretend not to know what she meant. "It was overdue," he said. She apologized, not for leaving, but for leaving with silence. Celeste nodded. "She's not looking for anything," he added. "She just needed me to hear her." "And did you?" "Yes," he said. "And I forgave her. Not for her. For me." Celeste exhaled. "That's big." "She asked me if I was happy," he said, glancing sideways. Celeste tensed slightly. "And?" He stopped walking. "I told her I've never been more at peace than I am now." His words didn't have dramatic flair, but they landed in her chest like the final brick in a foundation finally ready to hold weight. Cairo stepped closer, brushing her hair back. "I told her I'm building something I never thought I'd have," he said. "Not just a life, not just a legacy." His hand rested on her jaw, but a partnership, with someone who sees me fully, who never asked me to dim, but challenged me to rise. Celeste blinked back the burn in her eyes. "I've fought to be strong alone," she said. "Now I'm ready to be strong with someone." Cairo leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. "Then let's stop waiting for life to grant us permission." She smiled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said softly, "let's make this official, you and me. Life partners, not just lovers, not just co-founders, everything." Celeste didn't freeze. She didn't hesitate. She smiled, a slow, confident, knowing smile. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She pulled him into a kiss, not out of relief, but out of certainty. That weekend, They hosted a small event at the Sanctum. Only 30 people. Donors. Friends. Mentors. Some of Celeste's original team from Monroe Design. A few young architects who had once been turned away from the industry for not fitting the mold. They stood side by side, presenting the launch plan. When Celeste spoke, she didn't talk about herself. She spoke about purpose, about what happens when we stop protecting our image and start protecting our impact. Cairo followed her with a talk on freedom in design, freedom to fail, freedom to break form, freedom to build again, with better intention. After the speeches, people mingled. At one point, an older woman approached Celeste. "Do you know what I see when I look at you two?" she asked. Celeste tilted her head. "What's that?" "Balance. Not the kind where one person leads and the other follows, but the kind where both stand upright because the other refuses to let them fall." Celeste smiled. She looked across the room and saw Cairo laughing with a group of interns, encouraging one of them to pin their chaotic sketch on the wall. He looked up and caught her eyes. And in that glance, she saw everything she'd ever wanted. Not perfection. Peace. They went home that night exhausted, but not drained. Celeste curled into him on the couch, toes tucked under his legs, fingers grazing the inside of his arm. "You know," she whispered, "if we had stayed in that one-night box, we would have never found this." He kissed her forehead. "I think we had to lose each other first," he replied, "to realize what we were really worth." She nodded. "Then let's never forget it. Not even for a second." They stayed like that for hours. No more words, no more questions, just warmth, trust, and the knowing that they'd fought too hard to ever let pride win again. By spring, the Sanctum was no longer just a space. It was a movement. What started as an idea between two people healing from pride had grown into something much bigger. Over 24 young designers now passed through its doors weekly. Their work lined the halls. Some went on to earn scholarships. A few even landed internships that once felt impossible. But it wasn't just the talent that made the Sanctum special. It was the atmosphere. Honest, transparent, safe. The kind of place Celeste wished had existed when she was 22 and trying to. Convince the world that being a black woman in architecture didn't make her a risk. One afternoon, a local reporter visited to do a story. She interviewed 3 mentees. One said, "I used to think you had to be perfect to get seen. But here, they tell you the truth. It's not about being polished. It's about being real." The quote made the front page of the lifestyle section. Celeste clipped it and pinned it on her home office wall. Not for vanity, but as a reminder of why she had chosen this path. One Thursday morning, Celeste received an unexpected invitation. The National Design Council was hosting its annual summit in Washington, D.C. For the first time, they were inviting not just legacy architects, but community-focused innovators. The email was brief. "You've been nominated for the Resilience Through Design honor. We would be honored if you delivered the closing keynote." Celeste sat frozen for nearly a minute. Then she read it again. Keynote, not panelist, not workshop leader. Keynote. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about being heard. She didn't tell Cairo right away. She needed to sit with it. She needed to feel ready, not just to speak, but to let go of the final sliver of who she used to be. That night, they were cooking together when she finally said it. DC reached out. Cairo raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "They want me to speak. End of next month." He paused. "That's huge." She nodded. He studied her face. "But I'll have to talk about everything." "Then talk," he said. "Tell the truth. You earned the right to be seen as all of you, not just the CEO version." Celeste swallowed. "What if I say too much?" He stepped behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist and said into her ear, "Then someone else who's been carrying silence will finally breathe." The weeks leading up to the summit moved quickly. She wrote, revised, rewrote, deleted whole pages. She didn't want to sound rehearsed. She wanted to sound free. Cairo helped where he could, not by offering edits, but by asking the right questions. What moment changed you? What would you tell the woman you were 5 years ago? What would she say if she saw you now? And when she didn't answer, he didn't press. He simply stayed close, the way he always did when the stakes felt high. The day of the summit arrived. Celeste wore navy, strong, sharp, but simple, no flashy jewelry, no dramatic entrance. She walked the hall like she belonged, because she did. The room was filled with faces, leaders, students, media, mentors, and strangers. And at the back of the room, seated 2 rows behind the tech team, was Cairo. She didn't need to look twice. She felt him there. When they called her name, the applause was warm, respectful. She stepped onto the stage, took a breath, and began. I spent years building a name, a company, and a reputation people couldn't ignore. But along the way, I forgot to protect something more important, my humanity. The room quieted. I believed power meant never bending. That, to be respected, I had to be untouched by emotion. But then I fell in love with someone I wasn't supposed to. And instead of standing in that truth, I ran from it. Heads turned. Pens paused mid-sentence. I fired him. Not to save the company, but to protect the image I thought I needed to survive. And when I lost him, I realized the real cost of pride is connection. She paused. Let the silence work. But here's the part no one talks about. You can rebuild. You can learn. You can love again and not lose your power, but redefine it. She looked toward the back. She didn't have to name him. She knew he was watching. Today, I don't stand here perfect. I stand here whole. Because I chose truth over silence, vulnerability over image, and purpose over pride. When she finished, the applause didn't explode. It built, like a wave that starts deep, slow, and then takes over everything. She stepped off the stage, changed, and she didn't look back. They left the summit hand in hand, not because they had to perform unity for the cameras. Because it was instinct now. The moment they were alone in the hotel room, Celeste finally exhaled. She kicked off her heels, dropped her bag, and sat on the edge of the bed. Cairo poured 2 glasses of water. No champagne, no grand celebration, just presence. I watched you up there, he said, handing her a glass. She sipped. Did I overshare? He shook his head. You told the truth. Celeste set the glass down. I didn't think I'd feel so raw afterward. That's because you didn't speak from a stage, he said gently. You spoke from a wound that finally closed. The next morning, they walked through DC quietly. They didn't talk about the speech, or the applause, or the way 3 people stopped her to say, "You don't know me, but I needed that." They just walked, hand in hand, through a park, past a fountain, down a quiet block filled with blooming cherry blossoms. Celeste stopped near a bench. You know, I never thought I'd be this person. What person? This healed. Cairo smiled. That's not what I see. Oh yeah? I see a woman who finally forgave herself. That made her pause. She had done a lot of forgiving. But that part? That was still in progress. Back in Atlanta, life moved forward, not as a whirlwind, but as something steady. The Sanctum received funding from a city initiative. Cairo's community-based real estate firm got recognition for restoring forgotten neighborhoods without displacing residents. But none of that topped what happened one Sunday afternoon, months later. They were planting herbs on Celeste's apartment balcony, a routine they started to stay grounded. Cairo wiped dirt from his hands, then reached into the planter box. When he turned back to her, a small wooden box sat in his palm. Not flashy, not theatrical, simple, honest, like them. Celeste blinked. What's this? He opened it. Inside was a gold band. No diamonds, no distractions. Something we didn't get to do the first time. on our own terms. Celeste didn't cry. She smiled. "Say it," she whispered. Cairo knelt, one knee in damp soil. "Celeste Avery, you're already everything I want in a partner. Will you marry me, without fear, without pretense, and with the kind of love that doesn't need saving?" Her yes wasn't loud, but it was immediate. They sealed it with soil-stained hands. Their second wedding wasn't lavish. It took place on the rooftop of the sanctum. The sky stretched wide, warm with sunset. There were only 20 guests, close friends, mentees, a few quiet supporters from both of their journeys. Celeste wore ivory. Cairo wore deep navy. No aisle, no performance. Just two people walking toward each other. This time, when she stood before him, she wasn't trying to be powerful. She already was. And Cairo? He didn't look like a man who once got fired. He looked like a man who was home. During the vows, Celeste said something no one expected. To anyone watching, healing is not linear. Love doesn't erase the past, it honors it. And strength, the real kind, shows up when you let someone see your whole story and stay. Cairo added, "I don't promise perfection, but I promise presence, even in the quiet, even in the messy middle. I'll stay." They kissed before anyone could say "you may," "now," and the applause? It was soft, but it carried. 3 months later, a design magazine asked to feature them. The story focused on architecture and activism. But the final paragraph quoted Celeste's speech. "I spent years building a reputation people couldn't ignore, but I found peace in being a woman who could be loved, not just admired." Cairo framed it, not for the quote, but for the story they didn't need to explain anymore. Seattle was quiet under the early autumn sky. The city buzzed as always, but inside Monroe Design Group, there was a new kind of stillness. Celeste stood in her glass office, arms crossed, staring at the design board. It had been a year since Cairo walked out. A year since she signed the paper that ended his contract, and maybe a chance at something deeper. Today wasn't about regret. It was about launching something new. The Elevation Series, a campaign rooted in second chances, clean design, and bold declarations. The kind Cairo used to dream up. The team worked quietly, respectful of her space. Celeste's leadership had shifted. She was still firm, but no longer sharp-edged. She asked questions now, listened, mentored more than she managed. The team felt it, and they responded. But something still hung in the air. A memory. A chapter not closed. "Ms. Monroe," her assistant said, stepping in. "You have a visitor. No appointment." Celeste didn't glance up. "Tell them to schedule through my calendar." "It's Ellis Concepts." That made her pause. She turned slowly. "Cairo?" "No. His head of operations. He's here on behalf of their new partnership proposal." Celeste's pulse slowed, then picked up again. She gave a single nod. "Send him in." The man walked in, early 30s, confident, polite. He handed over a folder, crisp and clean. "We're expanding into civic architecture. Mr. Ellis suggested your firm might be a strong collaborative partner, especially for your award-winning public space concepts." Celeste flipped through the pages. Clean lines, strong vision. Cairo's fingerprints were all over it. Every sketch felt familiar, like revisiting an old dream. "Tell Mr. Ellis we'll consider it," she said coolly, hiding the tremble in her voice. "He'll be in Seattle next week for the design summit. Maybe you can speak then." She gave a professional smile. "Maybe." After he left, Celeste closed the door and sat at her desk. The room went still. Her fingers brushed over the sketch copy he'd included. A public library, with curved wood beams and light pouring through high glass windows. It was elegant, inviting, and warm. Exactly like the man who once touched her arm on a rainy night. She stood, walked to her shelf, and pulled out the old notebook Cairo had mailed her months ago. She opened to the back, the page he'd signed with his initials, and a quiet thank you. She hadn't replied. Not then. She wasn't ready. But now? The design summit arrived. Celeste arrived early, dressed in charcoal grey. Simple, commanding. She didn't walk in hoping to see Cairo, but she knew he'd be there. His name was everywhere. Speaker badges, printed agendas, even the digital promo screens. He was no longer someone in her orbit. He was orbiting on his own now. Independent, respected, still unforgettable. Midway through the second panel, she spotted him. Across the room, speaking to a group of university interns. He hadn't changed much. Still lean. Still sharp-eyed. But there was more calm in him now. More presence. Their eyes met. For the first time in months, neither looked away. That night, there was a private networking mixer on the rooftop. Soft music played. People sipped cocktails and pitched ideas under the glow of string lights. Celeste stood by the edge, looking out over the city. Her city, the one she built her legacy in. Then came a voice behind her. "You always liked the view." She turned. Cairo stood there, hands in his pockets. "I still do," she said softly. They stood quietly, letting the breeze move between them. No rush, no tension, just shared history and unspoken questions. "I saw the Elevation campaign," he said. "It's beautiful. Thank you. Your library design, it's your best work." He gave a small smile. "I had good roots." They both chuckled. It wasn't forced. Then silence again, until she finally spoke. "I wanted to call you, Cairo, after that note, but I didn't know what to say." "You didn't have to say anything. I meant every word." "I know. I didn't expect to ever work with you again," he admitted. "And yet you reached out." "I reached out because the project needed the best." "You still are." Celeste looked away, swallowing the knot in her throat. "And you? Are you happy?" He nodded. "I built something I believe in. I have a team that sees me, that trusts me." He paused. "And I still think about that night." Celeste's heart skipped. "I do too," she said. "But I also think about everything after, the silence, the pride, the things we didn't say." He stepped closer. "Would it have changed anything if I'd fought harder?" She met his eyes. "Maybe. But I had walls too. I let power get in the way of vulnerability." "We both did," he said. A beat passed. Then she asked, "Are you still with her?" He looked out at the skyline. "No. We ended things a month ago. Different paths." Celeste nodded. "Not with hope, but understanding." "Then maybe," she said quietly, "this time we speak before we walk away." Cairo smiled. "I'd like that." Their fingers didn't touch. Their bodies didn't lean in. But something opened between them. A space not filled with pride or fear. Just truth. And the possibility of something new. Cairo left the rooftop first. Celeste stood there for a while, watching the skyline shift as daylight melted into dusk. She wasn't sure what she felt. Hope, fear, or the strange calm that came when you stopped forcing things. Later that week, Ellis Concepts submitted a full proposal to collaborate on. A sustainability campaign for one of Monroe Design Group's major clients. Celeste reviewed the document herself. It was excellent, ambitious, bold, but measured. Cairo's signature all over it. He had clearly matured into his own voice. The structure, the risks, the ideas. He wasn't following anymore. He was leading. She approved the partnership. And when their teams met, she let her creative director take the lead. She and Cairo exchanged professional nods across the table, keeping the past tucked quietly behind their eyes. But after the meeting, he stopped by her office. He didn't knock. He waited by the open door until she looked up. "You have 5 minutes," she said with a smile. Cairo stepped in, hands in his pockets. "The proposal's not the only reason I came back." She leaned back. "I figured, I don't expect a do-over. I don't even know if that would work." He paused. "But I'd like the chance to know you again. As you are now." Celeste stared at him. There was no nervousness in his voice, no manipulation, just clarity. I'm not the woman I was a year ago, she said softly. I'm counting on that, he replied. She stood, walked to the window. So, what would this look like? You and me? He joined her. Dinner. No job titles, no history. Just two people figuring out if the rhythm is still there. Celeste turned to him. You think it is? He didn't smile. He didn't blink. I know it is. That night they went to dinner. Not at a luxury restaurant or a trendy rooftop bar, but a small Italian bistro near the water. The kind of place where no one knew their names, where they could just be. They talked for hours about their parents, their childhood dreams, about who they became when they thought the other was gone for good. There was laughter. There were pauses. There were silent moments that didn't need filling. And when he walked her to her car, he didn't kiss her right away. Instead, he cupped her face. If this works, I'm not walking away again, but we take this slow. No power plays, no pride. She nodded. No assumptions, no silence. Then she kissed him. Not because it was expected, but because it was time. That was how it began. Again, not with fireworks, with intention. 3 months later, Celeste stood before a packed audience at a Seattle leadership summit. Her panel topic, Lessons They Don't Teach You in Business School. She spoke about success, about risk, about failure. But then she paused. I once made a decision from fear. I let pride speak instead of truth. And I lost something irreplaceable because I didn't know how to say, I was wrong. The room was silent. Celeste continued, but life, if you let it, gives you a second chance. Not always with the same person, not always in the same way, but with yourself. To lead differently, to love differently, to show up fully. She locked eyes with Cairo in the audience. He smiled. She smiled back. Final scene. Later that night, they walked hand in hand along the marina. I like this version of us, she said, squeezing his fingers. He pulled her closer. Me too. We've got scar tissue, but we also have range now. She laughed. That's the designer in you talking. No, he said. That's the man who fell in love with a woman who never did anything halfway. Celeste leaned into him. This time, I'm not running. Cairo kissed her forehead. This time, we don't need to. And they kept walking. No titles, no games. Just love. Grown, not given, earned. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Tell us, have you ever let pride cost you something you loved? Drop your thoughts below. Like, if you believe real love takes courage. Subscribe for more stories that remind you it's never too late to be brave. Your story matters. Thanks for being here.